The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and old papers, that peculiar mix of history and dust that clung to every courthouse in the South. The air was thick, charged and heavy with a kind of quiet hostility that Maya Thompson could feel in her bones. She stood tall at the defendant's table, her black suit immaculate, her curls pinned neatly behind her ears, and her chin raised just high enough to show she wasn't afraid. She wasn't the one on trial, not really. Her client was. But in this courtroom, Maya's very presence was an act of defiance. It wasn't just any day. This was the day she had decided she wouldn't back down. The day she would face a corrupt system that had looked down on her people for generations. She'd spent years preparing for this moment, years of fighting through law school, enduring whispers from classmates who thought she'd only been accepted because of her skin color, years of biting her tongue in boardrooms where her voice carried less weight than anyone else's. But now, she was here. A defense attorney, brilliant, unflinching, and about to expose a case that would shake this little town to its core. Her client, a young black man named Darren Lewis, sat beside her, his hands cuffed tightly in front of him. He had been accused of resisting arrest, though his resistance had consisted of asking an officer why he was being stopped in the first place. Maya had seen the footage, grainy, taken from a distance, showing Darren calmly standing with his hands raised before he was tackled and beaten by two officers. One of those officers now sat across the room, uniform pressed, face blank, his nameplate gleaming under the courtroom lights, Officer Greg Mathers. From the moment Maya entered that courtroom, Mathers' eyes had followed her. Cold, measuring, filled with the kind of resentment that didn't need words. She could tell he wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by a young black woman. The judge, an aging man named Richard Alcott, leaned back in his chair, his robe slightly wrinkled, his expression one of practiced indifference. He'd seen hundreds of cases like this and had no interest in the truth. To him it was another day, another defendant, another inconvenience. He adjusted his glasses and gave Maya a dismissive look as she approached the podium. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, measured, and confident, "I would like to submit into evidence the recording of the incident that led to my client's arrest." Before she could even finish, Officer Mathers' attorney, a smug man with a slicked-back haircut, jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor, that footage was illegally obtained. It's inadmissible." Maya turned to face him calmly. "The footage was captured by a local store's security camera, sir. The owner voluntarily provided it to my office. There's nothing illegal about that." The judge didn't even glance at the file. "Objection sustained. The footage will not be admitted." Maya's jaw tightened. She had expected resistance, but not so blatant, not so open. "Your Honor," she pressed, "this footage clearly shows the events that transpired. Denying it would be denying the jury the opportunity to—" "I said it's inadmissible, Ms. Thompson." The judge interrupted sharply, eyes narrowing. "You'd do well to remember your place in this courtroom." A low murmur spread among the spectators. Maya's assistant, Jasmine, shifted uncomfortably beside the defense table, her eyes darting from Maya to the judge. But Maya didn't move. She stood there, her hands resting on the podium, her mind calculating her next move. She'd faced this kind of intimidation before, but never in such a nakedly hostile environment. Then, from the back of the room, Officer Mathers spoke, his voice laced with disdain. "You heard the judge, sweetheart. Sit down before you embarrass yourself." The words hit the air like a slap. The courtroom went silent. Even Judge Alcott's pen stopped tapping. Maya turned slowly, locking eyes with the officer. "Excuse me?" Mathers leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You heard me." Maya's lips curved into a small, dangerous smile. "Officer Mathers, I'll remind you that I am an attorney in this courtroom. You will address me as such, not with whatever language you use in the precinct locker room." Gasps fluttered across the room like sparks. The officer's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger. He shifted forward in his seat, jaw clenched. "Enough," the judge snapped, slamming his gavel down. "Ms. Thompson, you will not speak to an officer of the law in that tone." Maya turned back to the judge, her voice unwavering. "Your Honor, I'm merely reminding him of courtroom decorum. If respect is expected here, it must be mutual." The judge's eyes darkened. "Watch yourself, young lady. You're treading a dangerous line." And then it happened. A line crossed not just by words but by violence. As Maya turned to collect her papers, she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could react, a sharp, stinging blow exploded across her face. The sound of skin meeting skin cracked through the courtroom like thunder. Her vision blurred for an instant. Her cheek burned, her ears rang. It was Officer Mathers. He had marched across the floor and slapped her. Time froze. For one terrible second, no one moved. The entire room stood in suspended disbelief. The audacity, the rage, the silence that followed like the calm after a gunshot. Maya's hand rose instinctively to her cheek. The sting pulsed beneath her fingertips, but she didn't stumble. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. Slowly, she lowered her hand and looked at him, directly, steadily, without fear. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were pure fire. The crowd erupted. Shouts filled the room, some horrified, others triumphant. The judge banged his gavel, yelling for order. Jasmine ran toward Maya, trembling. "Oh my God, Maya."
"Are you okay?"
Maya raised one hand to stop her. "I'm fine," she said quietly. The judge barked, "Bailiff! Remove Officer Mathers." But the bailiff hesitated, eyes darting between the judge and the officer. No one moved. The message was clear. Mathers wasn't going anywhere. The officer sneered. "She disrespected me." "I don't take disrespect." "Disrespect?" Maya's voice cut through the chaos, low and calm, but each word was a blade. "You assaulted a woman when in a courtroom because she didn't bow to your authority." He took a step closer, towering over her. "You people think you can talk however you want and walk away. Not in my town." A chill rippled through the spectators. Maya didn't back away. She looked up at him, unflinching. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career." The judge slammed his gavel again, yelling something about contempt and disorder. But Maya wasn't listening anymore. Her heartbeat slowed, her focus narrowed. Every moment, every breath, every sound in that courtroom sharpened. She reached into her pocket, retrieving the pen she always carried. Sleek, black, ordinary-looking. She clicked it once as if out of habit and slipped it back. What no one realized was that the pen had been recording since she walked into the room. Every word, every insult, every sound, even the crack of the slap-'em was captured in perfect clarity and transmitted to a secure cloud server, linked to her firm. The evidence she'd been denied was now replaced by something far more damning. Undeniable proof of brutality, bias, and corruption inside the courtroom itself. She straightened her jacket, her face swelling slightly but her voice as steady as ever. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "if I'm to be held in contempt, so be it. But this record will show what truly happened here today." Judge Alcott glared at her. "You'll be quiet before I have you removed." She tilted her head slightly. "You already tried to remove me through violence. It didn't work." The courtroom fell into stunned silence again. Somewhere in the back, a woman began to clap quietly. One person, then another. The judge banged his gavel desperately, shouting, "Silence! Silence in this court." But the sound of hands clapping grew louder, echoing against the walls. Maya turned and walked back to her seat, every eye on her. The officer stood frozen, his hand trembling slightly now. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and she knew it. He knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. When the gavel finally fell for the last time that day, the judge stormed out furious. The officer's lawyer followed him, whispering frantic reassurances that it would all blow over. But Maya sat quietly, gathering her papers. Jasmine leaned close, whispering, "We can file a complaint, Maya. With the state board, the press, the—" Maya cut her off gently. "Already handled." "What do you mean?" Jasmine asked. Maya glanced at her pen, then at the clock on the wall. "Everything that needed to be heard was heard, and everything that needed to be seen will be seen." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, buzzing with rumors. Some claimed the officer had defended himself. Others whispered about the slap, the tension, the injustice. Maya didn't say a word as she walked past them. The bruise on her cheek glowed faintly in the afternoon light, a mark of humiliation that was already transforming into a symbol of resistance. In the distance, thunder rolled. Rain began to fall, soft and relentless, washing over the courthouse steps like a quiet cleansing. Maya paused at the bottom of the stairs, took a deep breath, and looked up at the sky. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The rain mixed with the heat on her face, cooling it, calming her heartbeat. Then she opened her eyes and spoke softly, almost to herself. "They thought they could silence me." She smiled faintly. "They just gave me the microphone." She turned and walked away into the rain, not defeated, not broken, but more powerful than anyone in that courtroom could have imagined. By the time the storm ended that night, the morning after the incident, the small town of Rockford woke up to something it hadn't seen in decades. Chaos fueled by truth. For years, the courthouse had been a silent fortress of control, a place where people like Maya Thompson were meant to lose quietly. But not this time. Not after what had been caught on that tiny recording device hidden in her pen. By sunrise, the audio was everywhere. The slap, the gasps, the officer's voice dripping with arrogance, all of it played on loop across social media. The world heard it, and the world was angry. Hashtags began trending. Journalists started calling the courthouse for statements, and protesters gathered outside with signs demanding justice for Maya and for Darren Lewis, the man whose wrongful arrest had started it all. Inside her small apartment, Maya sat on her couch, still in her robe, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside her. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages, reporters asking for interviews, law firms offering support, and strangers thanking her for standing up. But she ignored most of it. Her cheek was still sore, the bruise darkening into a defiant purple. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw both the pain and the power of what that moment had become. Jasmine, her assistant, paced in front of her, voice full of worry. Maya, the governor's office just released a statement. They're calling for a full review of Judge Alcott's conduct. And the state police have been told to investigate Officer Mathers. This is huge. Maya nodded slowly but said nothing. Jasmine frowned. You don't look happy. Maya finally looked up. It's just, they'll try to twist it. They always do. One video, one slap. They'll make it about my attitude, about me being too emotional, about me disrespecting authority. They'll turn me into the problem instead of the system. Jasmine sat down beside her. Then we don't let them. You've got the truth on your side. The truth, Maya murmured, has never been enough in this town. But even as she said it, something deep inside her stirred. Something that wouldn't allow her to back down. Later that morning, she put on her suit again, the same one she'd worn the day before. She walked out of her apartment and straight into the crowd outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed her immediately, microphones shoved in her face. Ms. Thompson, how does it feel to be assaulted in a courtroom by a police officer? Do you plan to press charges? What do you say to the judge who failed to stop it? Maya stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. She could have let her anger lead her words, but she knew better. This wasn't just about her. It was about every black lawyer, every woman, every person who had ever been told to know their place. She took a slow breath and spoke clearly. I came here yesterday to defend a man's right to justice, she said. What happened inside that courtroom was not just an attack on me, but on that very idea. Justice cannot exist in a place where power silences truth. But I promise you, the truth will not be silenced. The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters shouted more questions, but Maya didn't answer. She walked inside, each step echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. Meanwhile, across town, Judge Alcott sat in his office, red-faced and furious. The news reports played on his old television, his name flashing beside the words, "Under investigation." He slammed his fist on his desk. Damn woman! This is her fault. She's trying to ruin my career. His clerk stood quietly by the door, afraid to respond. Sir, the governor's office. I don't care about the governor, Alcott barked. That woman turned my courtroom into a circus. She's no hero, she's a manipulator. But even as he ranted, he knew the tide had turned. The courthouse phone rang nonstop. Lawyers from other cities were calling, condemning him. Civil rights groups announced they would be sending representatives to Rockford. The little courtroom that had once operated in shadow was now under a blazing spotlight, and at the center of it all stood Maya. 2 days later, a hearing was scheduled to determine whether Judge Alcott would be suspended during the investigation. The courtroom was packed again, but this time the energy was completely different. The walls themselves seemed to buzz with tension, the kind that comes when history feels close enough to touch. Maya sat in the front row, not as an attorney this time, but as the victim of misconduct. Officer Mathers sat across the room, his uniform gone, replaced by a plain gray suit. His eyes were full of fury, and not remorse, not fear, just pure burning anger. When the panel entered, the room fell silent. 3 senior judges from the state's Judicial Commission took their seats. The lead judge, a stern black woman named Judge Eunice Walker, spoke first. We are here to review the events that took place in Judge Alcott's courtroom on Tuesday. Ms. Thompson, please rise. Maya stood, her back straight. Do you confirm that this recording was captured during a court proceeding on that date? Yes, Your Honor, Maya replied. It was recorded automatically through a device for note-taking purposes. It was not intended for publication and until what happened. Judge Walker nodded. Understood. We have reviewed the recording. She paused, her gaze shifting toward Officer Mathers and then to the empty seat where Judge Alcott's lawyer now sat. We are deeply disturbed by what we heard. Whispers rippled through the room. Mathers' attorney tried to interject. Your Honors, my client acted in the heat of the moment. Judge Walker cut him off coldly. Your client acted with violence in a court of law. There is no heat of the moment defense for that. For the first time since the incident, Maya allowed herself to breathe. It wasn't victory not yet. But it was the first hint that the scales were beginning to shift. When the hearing ended, the decision came swiftly. Judge Alcott was suspended without pay pending investigation, and Officer Mathers was to face charges for assault and obstruction of justice. The crowd outside erupted when the news broke. Protesters cheered, waving signs that said justice for Maya and no one is above the law. But for Maya, it was just the beginning. That evening, as she sat in her office surrounded by stacks of files, she stared at Darren's case file, the one that had started all of this. He was still in jail, waiting for his charges to be dismissed. The officer who attacked her had also been the one who arrested him. The connection was too strong to ignore. She called the district attorney's office directly. Darren Lewis's case needs to be thrown out immediately, she said firmly. The arresting officer is under investigation for assault in open court. His credibility is destroyed, the DA hesitated. Ms. Thompson, you know we can't just— You can, Maya interrupted. And if you don't, I'll make sure the public knows that you're defending a case built on a corrupt officer's lies. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, we'll review it first thing tomorrow. Good, Maya said, hanging up. When she left her office that night, the streets were quieter. The protests had died down, replaced by a heavy, waiting silence. The town was holding its breath, watching what she would do next. In the days that followed, the state's legal community exploded with debate. Some called Maya Brave a symbol of justice. Others whispered that she had overstepped, that she had embarrassed the system. Anonymous letters arrived at her office, some full of praise, others full of hate. One simply read, "Go back to where you belong." She kept them all in a folder, not out of fear but as a reminder of what she was fighting against. Then, 3 weeks after the slap that had changed everything, Maya received a letter from the State Attorney General's office. She opened it with trembling hands, eyes scanning the words once, then twice as disbelief gave way to realization. They were offering her a new position, lead counsel for the State Judicial Review Committee. Her job? To investigate misconduct among judges and prosecutors across the state. She sat down slowly, heart pounding. It wasn't just a promotion, it was power. The kind of power she'd been fighting against her whole career, now placed directly in her hands. She could use it to rebuild what others had broken. The next morning, she returned to the same courthouse where she had been humiliated. But this time she didn't enter through the side door reserved for attorneys. She walked straight through the main entrance, escorted by reporters and state officials. Her appointment had been made public, and the symbolism was not lost on anyone. Inside, she found herself face to face once again with Officer Mathers, now in handcuffs. The bailiff called the room to order. This was his disciplinary hearing. Maya stood at the prosecution table, her new title shining on the nameplate before her, State Prosecutor, Judicial Integrity Division. As Mathers was led in, their eyes met. For a brief second he seemed smaller, not the swaggering bully from weeks before, but a man stripped of his illusion of power. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same courtroom that had once silenced her was now hers to command. When the judge asked if she had any opening remarks, Maya stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. What happened in this courtroom was not just an assault on me, she began, but on every citizen who believes in justice. When those sworn to uphold the law abuse it, the system rots from within. My role today is not vengeance, it is accountability. Her words echoed through the room, landing heavy. Mathers stared down at the table, his lawyer whispering nervously beside him. For hours the hearing continued. Evidence, testimonies, and recordings replayed. Every sound, every word from that fateful day was now part of the official record. And when it was over,